Well, good afternoon. I don't know whether I'm glad this is all connected because I've been sitting on the edge of my chair wondering whether it's going to come across and how to deal with whatever the timing is going to be. But I'm glad to see you. I'm glad I can't see you, but I'm glad we're together to discuss this book by Eric Metaxas. I'd love to find out how many of you have actually read it or know about Metaxas. But I guess that will come later if we can have some conversation. Let me just say two things, or tell you two quick stories why I think this is really very important. And the first one comes from my experience in the Navy when my ship put into the port in Yokosuka, Japan. And I was over in the town to buy a present for my wife and was negotiating the sale of her kimono. And the shopkeeper spoke no English. I spoke no Japanese. We were getting nowhere. Well, he went out and got his daughter, 12-year-old girl. She spoke perfect English. Well, so anyway, so we handled the sale all right. And as I'm picking out my money to get, I realize I've got an American penny. So I tell her the story about how American girls would put a penny in their slipper and for good luck at their wedding day. And I gave it to her and she took it and looked at it and she said, "Oh, Lincoln." I said, "Well, yes. How do you know about it?" Well, she knew all about Abraham Lincoln. It became apparent to me is how much of American life and culture and history the Japanese had learned and how much they admired it since the war. It was American arms that won the war with Japan, but it was Abraham Lincoln who won the peace. Second story I want to tell you is about something coming from our experience in Africa, where we take American kids, senior high and college kids over and match them up with young people, Ugandans, same age, same basic education, and hauling out into the bush to put up solar for light and power in various places, just in the name of him who said, "I am the light of the world." Well, anyway, inevitably what happens when the kids get to know each other, the Ugandans will ask in one way or another, "You Americans, you come from such a beautiful country. We see on television your beautiful highways, your beautiful buildings, your beautiful freedom. How have you done it?" And the American kids pretty much say, "Well, it just happens." The African kids know darn well it doesn't just happen. What is the foundation for this wonder we are as a country, Well, this is what Eric Metaxas is dealing with in this book that he's written. I don't know whether you're familiar with him or not, but he's 58, an engaging young author, well, relatively speaking at least. He's a son of Greek immigrants who came to this country in 1954. He's a graduate of Yale, author of Veggie Tales, these stories for Christian kids, little kids, and also written a number of biographies: Martin Luther, William Wilberforce, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Also the host of a daily radio program and a forum of conversation in New York called Socrates in the City, Life, God, and Other Small Topics. And we use together cultural issues, religion, politics, and humorous informality in a very engaging way. So our book today, If You Can Keep It, The Forgotten Promise of American Liberty. I was happy to give a copy to every member of Holy Trinity Classical Christian School, the graduating class. So here it is, If You Can Keep It. In 1787, when our Constitution was being drafted in Philadelphia, a woman by the name of Powell put a question to Benjamin Franklin: "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" And Franklin shot back, a republic, madam. And then the line, "If you can keep it, if you can keep it." And that's what this engaging book is all about, if we can keep it. And golly, what could be a more timely topic for these troubling days of our country? And I hadn't realized I was going to be doing this on President's Day, but nothing could be more appropriate. The promise of America, a government in which the people would govern themselves. Well, it would be fragile, Metaxas writes, this form of government. It would require of a people an attention and a willingness to shape and adjust their own interests to the welfare of the whole of society. And we the people who must keep this, to yield to a greater good for the whole. But it doesn't just happen. And this is what this book is looking at, the promise of our American liberty. It's about our civic institutions, our leaders, our government, but more it's about us as citizens of this free country, the idea of America. There's a paradox at the center of it, what has been called American or a nation for others. Are we a nation with a mission? Indeed. Are we America without a mission? We are indeed a nation with a mission to the rest of the world. But this is a big idea, not often heard, but at its core, it's true and extremely important. Metaxas begins his first chapter talking about this statue in the middle of New York Harbor, and he paraphrases this way about it. She's facing outward, and she's carrying a torch and holding it high. She does this for others. She wants them to see her and to make their way toward her, toward liberty. A city on a hill shining for all the world to see. In fact, the only reason we have it is so that we can share it with others. That's what he says on page 22. Well, then, if this makes your blood run chill, this book is not for you. But if it makes your blood run warm and tears moisten your eyes, this book is for us. The idea of America, indeed, the promise of America. Chapter 2, Golden Triangle. The golden triangle of freedom. This is the heart of his argument. Liberty cannot be established without morality, nor without faith. It's an idea that comes from Alexis de Tocqueville. He's going to have quite a bit to say about de Tocqueville. But here's the heart of his book. When I first heard about the golden triangle of freedom, Metaxas writes, I was shocked that although I had attended decent American schools and Yale University, the concept had eluded me. If America was indeed a country created, not because of ethnic or tribal boundaries, but instead because a people had come to believe and therefore embody a set of ideas. So then how could America be said to exist if almost no one anymore knew what these ideas are? So first, he wanted to make sure, Metaxas wants us to make sure what they are and to understand how they've come together to make us who we are. And then we all must allow what all of that further entails for us, that we, the people, cease to exist and America cease to exist. Wow. The world be infinitely poorer for it. Well, the golden triangle of freedom is this. Freedom requires faith. Faith requires freedom. And then the cycle goes around, the three go around, round, supporting one another ad infinitum. If any one of these three legs of the triangle is removed, the whole structure ceases to exist. Freedom requires virtue. Virtue is built upon faith, and faith requires freedom. It was this French political philosopher and historian, Alexis de Tocqueville, who upon his first visit to America, 1831, he noted this peculiar quality about American people. It was about a common social trait, an American cultural temperament. And the great word that is attributed to de Tocqueville, it's probably by someone else summarizing de Tocqueville's thought, but it's been quoted by no less than our presidents, Eisenhower, Reagan, and Clinton. I'm sure you've heard it. Not until I went into the churches of America, de Tocqueville speaking, and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America's great because she's good. And if America never ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. The secret of American freedom was, and therefore is, American virtue. Not that America was just somehow inherently good. It was something about the culture of America, about American shared values. The difference was not in their genetic makeup, nor in their drinking water, nor even in their beliefs. It was their behavior. But that behavior was informed by their beliefs. But if the beliefs have not been manifested in their behavior, those beliefs would have made no difference. Do you understand that? Well, Metaxas unpacks that. What de Tocqueville saw was a common internalized sense of right and wrong, or mores, or habits of the heart. That's an expression that de Tocqueville gave us. And it's what Benjamin Franklin saw, and also John Adams and other founding fathers saw as to be central to our republic. Liberty cannot be established without morality as a condition of our national character. And so our book, Republic, Madam, if you can keep it. It cannot be kept without the threefold golden triangle. Freedom requires virtue, virtue requires faith, faith requires freedom if we can keep it. Metaxas ends his second chapter to sum up. The only thing that was necessary for self-government and the United States to exist and function was religion. But religion itself could not properly function unless religion was detached from government. Only when religion was free, not dictated by convention or culture or by law, only then could it be truly religious, truly freedom. Then Metaxas makes this historical observation, page 76, if you're following. There were two crucial things that had to be in place for that to work, for us to become a nation. These two things were not planned by anyone, nor could they have been. One was that the colonies had to be more united than they were at the beginning of the 18th century. The other was that the citizens possessed a much deeper understanding of self-government and the faith that would make it possible, a moral understanding. So how could that be? Chapter 3, the wonder of the age. The formation of our communal life as a nation. Seminal to the decades just prior to our war of independence, there was, among many things, an idea that was then shaping the new nation, a birthing, as it were. An ancient idea, a biblical declaration. If any is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. That engendered a movement throughout the colonies that we have come to know as the Puritan mind, or the Great Awakening. How many of you studied that in high school? Metaxas introduces us to some of the people who were part of that movement, shaping our national character. Jonathan Edwards, John and Charles Wesley, and George Whitefield. I like to pronounce his name, Whitefield. This great awakening, it was also fostered by the Wesley brothers, Anglican missionaries from England. John, rector of Christ Church, Savannah, and when he went back to England, became the founder of Methodism. And Charles, the writer of so many beloved hymns, He was rector of Christ Church, Frederica on St. Simon's Island, just next door. The idea that was being articulated afresh and anew by various groups of people throughout the colonies, motivated, it would seem, by this common spirit and a common vision that has made us who we are as Americans, especially this fellow, George Whitefield. This fellow who, a Gloucesterman, who was son of tavern keepers, who went to school with the Wesleys and was also ordained a Church of England clergyman, who was to become an evangelist and arguably the greatest preacher of the time. He came to America in 1739, landing in Delaware, and off and on preached up and down the colonies from Maine to Georgia. George Whitefield. Metaxas is going to tell us all about him. But before we do, I'm being a preacher myself. That is my thing, and a great Whitefield fan. Let me share a portion of a sermon, just to give you a little bit of taste of what he was all about. It was 1745. To a large number of seamen in New York City, he drew a picture of a great sailing ship. All paint and polish, spanking white sails, proud and tall, the glory of her country. But under the pomp and pride, her timbers and tackle and gear, she's all rot and rust. Over smooth sea before a light breeze, and soon we shall seem be out of sight of land. But what means this sudden lowering of the heavens, that dark cloud arising from beneath the western horizon? Hark! Do you hear that distant thunder? Don't you see the lightning flash? There's a storm gathering. Everyone to his duty, boys. How the waves rush and dash the ship. The air is black. The tempest rages. Our mast is gone. The rigging a tangled mass upon the deck. What should we do? And the young sailors, caught up in the image, jumped to their feet. Take to the longboats, sir. Aye, the preacher replied. And Jesus said to the crowds, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? And they exclaimed, what should we do? Take to the longboat, sir. Aye, take to the longboat. The longboat is Jesus Christ. Do you believe that? After visiting Philadelphia and New York, Whitefield journeyed south, passing through Charleston on his way to Savannah, where he met and befriended General Oglethorpe. Whitefield helped him organize a home for orphan children, and for the rest of his life continued to supply the support for that good work and many others throughout the colonies. It was to be typical of his ministry in America, meeting and encouraging ministers, preachers, teachers, and common folk. Yearning they were for a spiritual revival, the popular culture so foul and corrupt, the times so ominous, yet filled with so much promise and hope. Whitefield indeed was an extraordinary preacher. His crossed eyes you can see in every one of his portraits. And if you've never noticed a cross-eyed person, you're sort of drawn into it, unless his eyes are so goofy, you can't. But he had a stentorian voice, a command of the language, a passion in the heart that moved men's souls. He was invited to preach in countless pulpits, the cities and towns across the land. He even was here at St. Helena's in Beaufort, Thursday, July 24th, 1740. We got there about 10 in the morning, he wrote in his journal, but the sun almost struck me down and took away my senses. In the cool of the evening, I preached. No air conditioning then, we can understand, can't we? And in the open air, wherever he could, to tens of thousands, the farms and hamlets and unnumbered pioneers on their way into the Appalachian wilderness. And whether they ever heard Whitefield or not, just about everyone in the colonies had heard about him, and were challenged by his message. The spiritual life of the community was touched. The effect of his ministry was then to meld the small local fires of religious revival that was breaking out all over into common spiritual conflagration which was the Great Awakening, and Benjamin Franklin. Oddly enough, Whitefield and Franklin became fast and devoted friends, greatly admiring one another. Their correspondence is a rich and revealing chronicle of what was going on in the soul of America, those transformative decades, 1740s, 50s, and 60s. And though Franklin was raised an Anglican, he was more of a deist in his spiritual philosophy, as were most of our founding fathers, really. Franklin never accepted his friend's evangelical faith, the eternal divinity of Christ, but the supernatural work of the Holy Spirit somehow touched him, though he would never admit that. As a practical man, Franklin greatly respected Whitefield's practical application of his faith, his work with the orphanage in Georgia. Franklin was particularly impressed with Whitefield's power as an orator. Once in Philadelphia, Whitefield was preaching in the open air and adjacent to the city hall, and Franklin measured the distance his voice carried, estimated the crowd to be over 30,000, and without amplification. Indeed, it was Whitefield's ability to move people and transform them that Franklin especially appreciated, a genuine remaking of society. Metaxas tells us all about this. Or rather, the power of the message, the power of the revival itself, and the real fruit that it bore, the social transformation of America, the preparation of a colonial people for independence. Whitefield died in Newburyport, Massachusetts in 1770. His mortal remains are interred in the vault built under the pulpit of Old South Presbyterian Church there, the congregation that Whitefield, he himself, had founded in 1746. Its bell was cast by none other than Paul Revere. I have visited his tomb. And scholars who have studied the Great Awakening in the colonies just before the Revolution point out several things linked to its influence, the fruit that it bore. A marked moderation of the rough and tumble spiritual, moral condition of life in the colonies, hard drinking, dissipation, blood sport, giving way to a more settled and ordered social tranquility, and a general increase in the things of religion, church attendance, Jewish synagogues in Rhode Island and Charleston, in support of charitable institutions, orphanages, hospitals, hostels for the poor and the destitute, the needs of women and children, a commitment to education, institutions founded for higher education of an enlightened population, Brown, Rutgers, Dartmouth, Pennsylvania, Princeton, Columbia. Jonathan Edwards was president of Princeton. The study of the Greek and Roman traditions, classical culture, and the fresh winds of the intellectual enlightenment, the roots of our culture and our government, and a concern for the welfare of the dispossessed, the marginal people, Native Americans, Indian missions, care for the Black slaves, their spiritual and social development. The seeds of the abolition movement were sown. And most important was the common vision of America emerging, a city set on a hill, a destiny, perhaps a manifest destiny as a people and a nation under God, pushing beyond the wilderness to the Western Sea, a land of hope and promise for all the world to see. De Tocqueville, 100 years later, would see it as the formation of a uniquely new kind of human being in the world, a truly free person, standing in fear and awe of God, created with equal dignity, justified by faith alone, accountable to God alone, without mediation to pope or bishop or king or squire, yet obligated in community to the welfare of the neighbor, who enjoys the same common right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and with whom is shared a responsibility for mutual, just, and peaceful governance, the communal spirit of the New England town meeting. It was a temperament shaped by these certain habits of the heart, these civic virtues essential to the practice of a participative democracy in the commonwealth of a free society. But beware, warned de Tocqueville, that this wonderful freedom become a radical individualism and the culture of mutual care and interdependence, become a society bent on itself with none but the ethic of interest and greed, my need, my profit, my comfort, my fulfillment, my entitlement. This is the ongoing issue of this new humanity that is the American dream that Metaxas is so beautifully unfurling for us. The challenge we continually face as citizens of this great country, indeed the world, has continually marveled and wondered about America is carefully watching us. What is the cause of our political crisis today, we wonder? What has happened to us? Is there something we've forgotten? Lots of talk, lots of heated, rancorous, disturbing talk and action. What have we forgotten about who we are? So how are these civic virtues cultivated, which have kept us free and the model for democratic government, our freedom, our prosperity as America, our continuing inspiration to the peoples of the world who are asking, how have you done it? Our habits of the heart, how are they cultivated? Chapter 4, venerating our heroes. Metaxas writes, it is essential for citizens to behave morally in order for self-government to work. Mores, the habits of the heart of its citizens, are the center. And so we look to the example of those men and women who have exhibited these virtues publicly and privately, their example in the stories of their lives, the model they inspire. Succeeding generations, we venerate our heroes. But lately, it's become the fashion to denigrate those who've gone before, to dig into their stories and dig up the dirt, to put down their society, their motives, to put them down, even topple their statues, or simply failing to remember them at all. It's had a toxic effect on the young generations, our young people. We've had 50 years of imbibing this noxious brew, bad habits of the heart. So Metaxas gives us some examples to remember. George Washington, Nathan Hale, and Paul Revere. And the ways we do remember them, the common and classic accounts of their lives and their roles in our common history, how we convey them generation to generation. How many of you learned in school, listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is yet alive. To remember the stories of our national heroes, to emulate their example, to celebrate their spirit, to hear Paul Revere's bell ring from George Whitfield's tomb. So what about our contemporary heroes? Who might he add? It caused me to think of some of the people that might be added. Last month, we celebrated the day. We honor Martin Luther King, his great address, I have a dream. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Well, is it not our dream too because of him? Or Billy Graham. I think about Billy Graham, whom I was blessed to know and work with when I was bishop in Pittsburgh and planning the crusade in that city in 1993. His influence across America, across the world. And just a personal note, if I may, Billy came to spend a morning with us, a few of us, denominational heads, Council of Churches, Salvation Army. It was about 10 or 11 of us to pray for Pittsburgh. We were just as men together, burned by the love of our city and the love of our nation, and the love of God and hope together. I think also of General Dwight Eisenhower, his address to the soldiers, sailors, and airmen that D-Day, June 5th, 1944. You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world upon you, the hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. And in his pocket, the hand-scribbled note for release in the event. Here's what it said. Our landings in the Cherbourg area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. The air and navy and army forces did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to that attempt, it is mine alone. He accidentally dated the note July 5th. It should have been June 5th. We're sure he had a lot on his mind, the editor's note, but or was it in an unconscious association with the day and the season upon which we remember our national character as a free, conscientious, moral, hopeful society, a light to the nations? Our own David Lauderdale and Stephen Wise, an article, April 29th, 2016, Beaufort Gazette, story honoring Harriet Tubman, her connection to South Carolina low country, 1862 and 1864, her story. Well, we remember it, Harriet Tubman, every time we cross the bridge on Route 17. And her memorial on the road, Tabernacle Baptist Church, Craven Street. Her likeness there, soon to be, and in our wallets, a $20 bill. Oh, so many heroes, our American heritage we can share with each other, and especially our young people, continually defining the American dream, whom we are as a nation and a people, a city set on a hill for all the world to see. Chapter 6. American exceptionalism. Applied to America, it was an idea even before the founders gave us a government based upon it. And the question is now, more than 2 centuries after the idea became a nation, shall that idea continue to be and to live, or whether the nation has eclipsed it and effectively killed it? The year was 1630. The fleet of 11 ships bearing its passengers to the New World and a brave new life. John Winthrop, the man destined to be governor of the new Massachusetts Bay Colony on board the flagship Arabella, delivered a sermon. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work that we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, and we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. We must consider that we shall be as a city set upon a hill. Such a wonderful hope is America. Far beyond our landed shores or the aspirations of our people, even the world. How shall it continue? Metaxas turns at last to Abraham Lincoln. February 21st, 1861, his journey to Washington, D.C., and his inauguration as president, his Trenton, New Jersey address, reflecting on those battles half a century before that were made to secure the independence of this new and free nation. Here's what he said. I am exceedingly anxious that this union, the Constitution and the liberties of the people, shall be perpetuated in accordance with the original idea for which that struggle was made. And I shall be an humble instrument in the hands of the Almighty and of this, his almost chosen people, for perpetuating the object of that great struggle, his almost chosen people. instruments of that great struggle continuing. It is bought with a price, an abiding obligation of responsibility and sacrifice, an honest assessment that beneath our glittering wealth and power, there is and ever will be rot and rust within, always humbly to be regarded and genuinely to be repented, yet with abiding enthusiasm and confidence in the grace and providence of God and the community of a common vision of hope. What must be done? Take to the longboat, sir. Chapter 7, Loving America. If you don't boast about your home, it will fall down and crush you. That's a Greek proverb. This is the way Eric is ending his book. And I think of my young Japanese friend who helped me buy a kimono. Oh, Lincoln, she said. And the Ugandan youth who inquire of their American friends, you have such a beautiful, resourceful country. How have you done it? The continuing renewal of America. How have we done it and how shall we keep it? This is the promise of the American dream. Well said and true that the only thing which is the power to renew an institution, a people, a nation, is that which created it in the first place. This is why I gave a copy of this book to each graduate of Holy Trinity Classical Christian School. I wish I could afford to give it to every graduate in America. So I enthusiastically commend that you read it. Better yet, give a copy of it to your schoolers, your high schoolers, your college kids. Read it together. Here's the author's final words. So go forth, America, knowing that if your love is true, it will be transmuted one way or another into love for everything that is good beyond America, which is her golden promise to the world and the promise we, you and I, must keep. Thank you, Eric Metaxas. Thank you for this clear and enthusiastic call to renew our love for our land, for our country, and the renewal of its habits of the heart. I wrote to Eric Metaxas and told him I was presented this book today, and I am pleased to have received his reply. Let me just share it with you. Dear Bishop Hathaway, I am sincerely honored to hear from you and to hear the happy news that you regard the message of my book, if you can keep it, as worthy of sharing with the good citizens of Beaufort. Nothing I have written is as important to me as this book is now, principally because of the times in which we find ourselves. As I say in the book, we cannot keep liberty and the republic if we don't understand what that liberty is and how it works and what we must do to keep it. That's the point of the book. Sincerely, Eric Metaxas. Thank you. Thank you. Are we to be open now for conversation?
Yes.
We've got a few minutes. I wish we had more.
Yes, but we do. And thank you so much. That was really amazing, the way that you laid it out, and really thought-provoking. So we have a few comments in the chat, and please feel free, everyone, to put your notes in the chat. Did you want to say something about this reading list, Alden?
Well, here is a bibliography I put together because it's touching on so many questions and books and so forth about this period of our history and also about our own situation now, civically and morally and spiritually. And so if any of you would wish to follow up, Os Guinness, The Free People's Suicide, he's really the author or the one that clarified for Metaxas this golden triangle of freedom. And then, of course, well, I won't get into William James, but John Meacham, The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels, when he's dealing with his soul, these questions. Ian Murray, a wonderful biography of Jonathan Edwards, a new biography. I'd love to talk about that someday. Who was one of the great architects of our country in those days before the revolution. He, as I said, he would wind up as the president of Princeton University. And I'm sure there's many other books that you would suggest in this country. I think it's a really poignant to me. I didn't realize this was President's Day, but here we are in America.